Hi, we're going to talk about fit challenges when it comes to the Plain Jane Pullover.
Yeah.
The pullover is just a basic shape, but sometimes we need to make some adjustments to fit our body. So I have Meg here to help me to talk about her particular fit challenges so you can see how you might be able to adapt the pullover for your body. So we're going to talk about Meg. Meg doesn't mind if I talk about her here. And I'm going to start by asking you to turn sideways. So turn sideways to the camera. And you can see that Meg pokes out a little bit in front and pokes out a little bit in back. So she's kind of an S shape. Now she's got more across the top in front and more across the bottom in back. So those are two kind of different things we need to deal with. Then also, let's talk about wingspan. Meg, show us your wingspan. The wingspan is from wrist to wrist. So you can put that arm down if you want to. But one thing you'll want to know when working on your sleeve is what is your half wingspan. May I move your hair here, please? Measuring from the middle of the back neck, so right at the top of the spine, you're going to measure from this point to the wrist or to where you want the sleeve to end. That's going to be an important measurement when it comes time to figuring your sleeve length. Thank you. You can turn around. So as we work the sweater, we're going to first do the back, and we're going to worry about how to get that extra width across the back. And then when we work the front, we're going to worry about getting some extra length across the front, because when Meg measured from the top of her shoulder across the bust down to the front center or across the apex, this is a longer length than she's going to have when she measures from here straight down. So we're going to want to know the difference between those lengths. We'll add some stitches. Won't add stitches. We'll start with a wider back measurement and narrow it up to the armholes. And when we work the front, we're going to work some short row shaping right here along the bust line to give some extra length here. This is just one of many ways that you can adjust for these types of changes, because you could decide to add extra width across the bust, which would also take care of that. So this is just one way we're going to do take care of these challenges. So voila, thanks to the magic of YouTube, we have a finished sweater. How about that? Okay, so here's what we did. For the front, well, let's see, we started in the back, right? So let's talk about the back. So Meg, do you want to tell us what you did for the back?
So for the back, I started with the full back measurement, and then I did 2 sets of vertical decreases, sort of on the outer edge and then a little bit further in. They weren't very close to the sides, so that the sides stayed straight and unaffected. And you can't really see the vertical decreases that I made. And so I made those so that the rest of the back would be more narrow and fit my back better.
Right, so let's talk about where you did those. Step forward just a little bit here. So instead of doing her decreases along the side seam, she wanted to keep that side seam straight. So what she did was she did decreases. I'm going to touch you and you're going to giggle, right? Okay, so she did a series of decreases in a line like this, but rather than having all the decreases happen right stacked like this, she did a pair of decreases here, and then here, like this, up to about the level of where the armhole was going to be. And from that point, it's straight. Okay, so then she got to a little bit narrower width. Remember, in a drop shoulder sweater, we are not trying to get the shoulder seam to be on the shoulder. The shoulder seam is just going to be however long it has to be to take care of the entire width of the sweater. So her drop shoulder, because she's relatively wide, actually starts right here. So here's the top of her, let's see, where's the top of your shoulder? There's the top of her shoulder. There's all this extra that's what makes it a drop shoulder. So she did vertical decreases here and here and offset them. All right, now tell us what you did for the front.
For the front, I worked it as the pattern had for the first while, and then I did some short rows just in the middle so that I could add extra length for the bust. And again, keeping the sides the same so that the front and back would match up along the side seams.
So in this case, she's doing extra rows right through here without going all the way to the side. So the side seams are exactly the same length as they are in the back, but the bust, the extra length happens just in a few short rows over the bust. When you do that, you want to make sure that you aren't having your short rows go exactly to the apex of the bust. You want to keep them outside that apex, so you want them to end up here to get that extra length. Now, what we found out, because this was a prototype sweater, we're playing with it, we did some measurements, we figured out how many short rows she needed to have. We measured the difference between her front length and her back length and decided she needed, I think the math ended up to be 6 extra rows. As it turns out, it probably should have been 8, and I'm going to show you why. If you turn sideways, as you can see, it still rides up just a little bit in the front. Now, it's better than it would have been if she hadn't done any short rows at all, but I think she could have used another pair of short rows to add a little bit more length there. So we'll know next time, the next time she makes this sweater, she's going to add an extra 2 short rows there. You may not need that many short rows, you may not need any at all, but if you have a problem with sweaters riding up in front because there's so much bust to go over or so much stomach to go over or whatever, then short rows might be your friend. Another thing she could have tried, which we might try on another sweater, is doing those vertically aligned increases. So we decreased on the back, we might increase on the front, and if so, we would increase along a vertical line here and here. So up the front and then a little bit toward the outside. So adding increases to make it wider would be another way of dealing with that. I don't know, I knew how to do short rows, so that's what we were doing, but we might try the vertical increases the next time. Here's one thing to think about though. If you are increasing using those vertical increases, so you're adding width, you're going to have different stitch counts at the top for your front and your back, and you're going to have to adjust for that. That's why I like using short rows, because it maintains the same number of stitches. The instructions tell you how to work the neck. It says pick up stitches evenly and then has you decrease. That's to keep the neckband line flat. You want to stop and check that every now and then and make sure it fits the way you want. Meg wanted a fairly wide neck, I think. Is that right? So
yes.
She didn't do quite as many rounds on the neckband as the pattern called for. So she has a slightly narrower neckband and a slightly wider neck opening than the pattern for her size would have called for. Now let's talk about the sleeves. Once Meg made her front and her back, sewed the shoulder seams together, blocked it, sewed the shoulder seams, and made the neck. It's important to make the neck first because it's not going to fit the same way unless you have that neckband on. So get the neckband to fit the way you want it to. Then it's time to measure for the sleeves. Now, if she had followed the instructions for her size for the sleeve would be out to here somewhere, okay? So remember that half wingspan we measured. Once she knew her half wingspan measurement, she could then figure out how long her sleeves needed to be, because she's going to take the half wingspan and then figure out what half of the back. Let's take a look at this again. Here's her wingspan, and here's what half of the back is. So her sleeve only needs to be this long, which is much shorter than the pattern would have called for her size. So she's going to know that she needs to do her sleeve for X length. What was that, 11 or 12 inches, something like that. Okay. So The other thing that she needed to do was, you can turn around. The other thing she needed to do was find out where on her body or where on her arm this sweater was going to come to. So when her upper, we're not looking at her arms, but her upper arm circumference might be larger than where the sleeve actually starts on her body. So this would be her upper arm circumference, but actually, you see my hands go down? Where the sleeve, where the beginning of the sleeves fit, is actually a smaller circumference. So it's not the upper arm circumference she's worried about, it's where the sleeve starts on this body. So tell us how you did that, Meg.
Sure. So after I made the front and the back, blocked them, put the shoulders together, and made the neck, I put it on. So at that point, it was sort of like an open poncho without any side seamed or anything like that. I then took a stitch marker for marking it, put my arm out, and pinched underneath my arm and marked where I wanted the armhole to start. I did that on both sides, and then I counted and made sure that I was on the same row on both sides, and I was. And that's what I marked as the start of the armhole there. And then I was able to know that the part underneath it would be the side seams and the part above it would be the armhole, and I could start working on my sleeve.
So then she had to, once she knew how big that armhole was going to be, she had to calculate the number of stitches she needed for that circumference, how many stitches to pick up. She knew how many stitches she needed for her cuff, and she had to do a little bit of math to see how often that she needed to decrease to get from this circumference to this circumference in that length. And we will talk about that in class. One thing, when you're doing a fairly large number of decreases in a relatively short distance, you may have to do more than one pair of decreases per row. So I think you had to do a couple of rows that had double decreases.
Yes.
But you were decreasing every row, and then on 2 or 3 rows you were doing double decreases. So don't be surprised if that happens, but if you have relatively longer arms compared to your body, you might be able to just do the size as written in the pattern. If you'd like more instruction like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out the links in the video notes for more ways you can find me. Thanks for watching.